Welcome to the Alain Guillot podcast, a podcast about life, leadership, and money matters. Our guest today is Mark Babbitt. Mark is the president of WorqIQ, a consultancy focused on improving leadership and developing workplace intelligence. And he is also the founder and CEO of U-Turn, a community focused on helping people get their first internship or job. He's also the best-selling author of A World Gone Social, How Companies Must Adapt to Survive. And today we will speak about his second book, Good Comes First, How Today's Leaders Create an Uncompromising Company Culture that doesn't suck. And this is very important, that doesn't suck. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate your time very much.
So, Mark, okay, so I was looking through your profile and we have a few things in common. Uh, I wonder if you could start by telling us a little bit about your background. First of all, how do you get into this line of expertise? And I noticed that you and I both were janitors at one time of our life. So maybe if we could start from there.
Well, I'll tell you, without doing the whole childhood thing, I grew up in a very small town in Oregon, and a job was a job, and we did what we had to do to pay the bills, and so I learned a lot in that process. My sister helped me get that job. She was a nurse where I fulfilled that duty. So. But I left that behind. I joined the U.S. military and as an engineer, and they trained me how airplanes worked and how electronics worked. And I did what every military trained engineer does. At the end of that, I went to Silicon Valley and spent the next 10 years of my life there before I threw my hands up and said, "This sucks. This is not who I'm supposed to be. This is what maybe my father wanted me to be. This is what maybe was supposed to pay the bills, but it didn't fulfill me. And I got tired of going to the same building in the same cubicle, every day, staring at the same monitor. So I broke off and went on my own, and that was 1990. And I've bounced in and out of the corporate world since, but I've always come back to a sense of entrepreneurship and leadership. And I was very fortunate at one point to get involved in the startup world because of my roots in Silicon Valley, and got infinitely involved in the career space. And I quickly learned that we were sending people into the workforce, and the workforce wasn't treating them very well. And I came to the conclusion that it was very much a leadership issue. And so you asked how I stumbled into this niche. I decided to try and do things better, and starting with U-Turn and then with WorqIQ, that's been my life's mission now, is to create a workplace that does not suck, where people don't feel beat down. And as well as I do, the workplace has changed so much with the pandemic. And now is just the perfect time to reevaluate what we want out of work, and how leaders can create a better workplace.
So from your background, I assume that you come not from a wealthy family. I don't know if I'm assuming too much there or not, but I always like to focus or ask whether it's just that I have people that insist that we are in a caste system, and if you are if you're not born rich, you are doomed to stay poor. And I wonder what's your opinion about that.
Well, I have a pretty strong opinion about that. I did grow, like I said, I grew up in very small lumber towns. My dad got out of the Navy, met my mom, moved from San Diego to live near her parents, my grandparents in Oregon, and started pushing a broom in a lumber mill, again, just to pay the bills. And we moved, I think I lived in 14 different cities before I entered high school, because we had to move wherever the work was. And we we lived in some towns, we lived in some houses, plywood floors, no insulation. I mean, it was just, that was life back then. And me and my brother and my sister, we didn't know any better. We still had fun. My dad loved to hunt and fish, and my mom worked hard to, to help pay the bills. But and eventually, I will tell you, my dad grew up to own and manage his own lumber mill, and ended up doing very well in his life. But it didn't start out that way. And I was definitely not born with a silver spoon in my mouth or a Mercedes in the driveway. It just wasn't like that.
Okay, so it seems like you, dad, and you yourself, you pay your dues. You didn't start with the work that you were passionate about, your final destination. You had to do some crappy work along the way until finally you find the niche where your skills and your desire, your passion align. Is that correct?
Yes, and it only took me about 45 years to do it. So that whole overnight success thing, again, I kind of stumbled into the startup world and ended up doing very well there. And that's what allowed me and my wife to create U-Turn. And that was a passion project. We still haven't monetized that. That was something we did to give back because we wanted to make the workplace a better place. So it sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes, as you know, it takes a while to find what it is you're passionate about. And then it takes even longer to be in a position of any influence at all. And that's why I'm so thrilled that our publisher took a chance on us and talking about, the company culture and putting good first and treating people with respect. And it's kind of an unusual position in the business world to talk about how to treat people well, but they're taking a chance on us and we appreciate them.
Well, but how much of a big chance it was, because you are already a published author. Your first book did pretty well. I wonder if you could tell us a word or two about your previous book.
Well, yeah. So A World Gone Social came out in 2014, and it was right when social media was changing the business world. And even me being an old guy, with U-Turn, I had a very young crew. And that crew convinced me that I had to stop being an introvert and stop being a man behind the curtain and get out in front of this thing. And so these college students, these recent graduates, taught me everything I knew about social media, and U-Turn just blew up like overnight. It just blew up, and it was all on the back of social media. We never spent a penny on traditional advertising. It was all on social media. And then a business partner of mine, we had this idea, well, if our business can do that, then other businesses should be able to do that too. And so that's why we wrote A World Gone Social. And we talked about not just how to grow your business, but how to protect your business on social media, how to make sure you weren't saying stupid things and making the wrong moves that would be, the Bank of America's, the Wells Fargo's, the United Airlines, that were just doing everything wrong on social media and paying the price. And so we wanted to talk about that too.
Well, okay. And then this book, I must say that is you co-wrote it with Chris Edmonds. I wonder how the idea came about, how did the partnership to write a book together with another person was done, because it's not always easy.
Well, I will say this. When my first book was also co-authored, and it was a stressful experience, exactly as you described. Good Comes First was none of those things. It was Chris is an amazing influencer, and he's so articulate and worldly in his views, and we were just so closely aligned on that businesses were treating the symptoms of a poor workplace, of a poor culture. We worried about things like employee engagement and conformance and compliance and productivity, but you can't fix those things if your company culture is terrible. I mean, how can you ask an employee to be fully engaged if you don't treat them well, if you don't treat them with respect? And so he and I were sitting in a steakhouse in Chicago and said, you know what, we're onto something here. Let's write a book together. And it took 3.5 years to get it just right. And the pandemic hit right in the middle of all that. And again, it kind of changed the whole workplace. And all of a sudden people had all this freedom and autonomy, and they were working from home, which the first manuscript of the book told leaders that's exactly the direction we needed to go. And then here we are halfway through the book and we're already there. And so we had to change and pivot. And it was inspiring. It was invigorating. And 3 years later, we had a manuscript, and now the book comes out in 2 weeks.
Okay, so could you give the listeners a synopsis of the book? What can we expect to find in it?
Well, the book starts by talking about using data to show that most people are not happy at work. They don't feel fulfilled. They are not engaged. And then we start to talk about why. And the why comes down to leadership. And not just leadership, but the reality is leaders for years, certainly when I was a young leader, I was measured on results, period. Nothing else mattered. It didn't matter how you treat people. It didn't matter if one of your best employees left because they weren't happy, you just replace them, right? And as soon as we stumbled onto this idea that culture is almost always a leadership issue, the book just kind of takes off from there. And we talk about what needs to change. And we talk about companies that are doing it very well right now, and frankly, some companies that aren't. And that concludes the first section of the book. The middle section is exactly how to do it right, to get everything down on paper, to define your values in behavioral terms that are measurable. So now we can't just say, well, let's say integrity is one of our corporate values, right? Well, how do you measure that? And so we walk leaders through that process, quantifying how a team might view their leader as it pertains to integrity. And then finally, at the end of the book, we talk about the practical stuff. What's going to be your legacy as a leader? How do you build a team around good comes first? How do you hire and retain the best people that are already aligned with a good comes first approach to culture? Not just bring in anybody, not just focus on performance, not just focus on the top sales guy who might be a jerk and nobody likes working with him, right? But actually hire people that are already aligned to the good comes first process. And so we end the book on what we hope is a very practical and tactical approach to building a great culture.
And are you talking about a specific kind of job, let's say office work? Because I mean, maybe it's my ignorance, but there are some jobs that no matter what kind of leadership there is, they suck. I mean, I just had an interview. I had an interview with a guy who wrote a book called Dirty Jobs or Dirty Work or something like that. And he was talking about the guy who fly drones to kill people. I mean, no matter how nice his boss is on the top, that's a dirty job. No one feels good to do.
It is a dirty job. And I get the real key there is we talk about building a purposeful culture. And in addition to purposeful, it also needs to be positive and productive, because we can't just build some kumbaya, you know, it feels good to work here if we don't actually get the work done, right? If the purpose of the business can't all be about money, but it has to be successful. The business won't be around. Nobody will have jobs, right? So we talk about those three things: purposeful, positive, productive. And a lot of what you're talking about is, and you've been there, I've been there. Yes, sometimes you just pay the bills. But if you have a boss that respects you and mentors you, and even just like, let's just say in my engineering days, I was actually surprised. This was a long time ago. I was working very late on a project, and I walked out, and here's like my boss's boss in the hallway, and he scared me, and I jumped. I said, "Oh, Robert, what are you doing here?" He goes, "Well, I saw your car out front. What are you doing? What are you doing here so late?" And so I explained the project. He said, Mark, if you're going to be here this late, you got to ask for help. I'm here to help you. And it changed my entire view on leadership.
Right.
I was working, I mean, I left that job a couple years later because it sucked, right? But Robert, became a mentor. He showed a genuine interest in me, not just the project, but in me. He was worried about me being late. He knew I had a newborn at home. He knew I had a young wife at home. What are you doing here? Right. And that changed everything for me, because I knew now he cared. Now, maybe I still worked late, but I wasn't angry when I worked late, because I knew he appreciated the effort, and he was there to provide me the resources to make sure maybe I don't have to work as late or as often late. And that changed everything for me.
Yeah, well, you mentioned respect, and I feel that respect is just the starting point, the bare basics. And unfortunately, many companies don't even meet that first requirement. I mean, there is so much still sexual discrimination. There is still racial tensions, and now with political I don't know, tensions or polarizations. There are people that if you wear one hat or have a not different color, they becomes uncomfortable. So
Uncomfortable is a polite word. It turns our stomach sometimes, the divisiveness, that polarization, right?
Yeah.
The foundational principle of good comes first and building an uncompromising company culture is putting respect on the same plateau as results. And yes, we're going to keep driving results. We already talked about this. Results matter, right? And a lot of companies are really good at results, but they're not good at respect. So what we're asking leaders to do as a foundational principle of a good comes first culture is to care as much about respect. Measure respect as often as you measure results. You know as well as I do, we have 400 different ways of measuring results: productivity, profits, calls per hour, right? Profit margins. There's a million ways of measuring results, but nobody addresses respect. Nobody addresses how we're being treated in the workplace. And that, in good comes first, is what we're asking leaders to do. Take a minute and decide what kind of workplace you really want to be. Values, core values, behaviors, right? Maybe respect is one of them. But without respect, you said it best. That's like the basics, right? Because if you don't have respect, then we deal with racial tensions. Then we deal with gender pay gaps. Then we deal with a non-inclusive workforce. We don't listen to all the voices in the room, right? We only hire people that look and act like us, right? Respect is like the baseline. Right. And if we can't meet that criteria exactly as you said, then none of the rest of it matters, because we have to show people they matter. And it doesn't matter what their religion is or the color of their skin or their gender. People matter. Their contributions matter. They bring something to this company that we covet, that we appreciate. And until we show that, it's really hard to build a great company culture.
I wonder if you would dare to mention any names of companies that you think are doing a good job, that have a respectful work environment, that have opportunities for people who wants to advance in their career.
Well, yeah, there's so many companies out there that are doing a great job of this, and we highlight some of them in the book. We highlight Radio Flyer. Maybe you had the little red wagon when you were a kid, the little all metal wagon. Or maybe you pulled your kids around in them. They've done just a wonderful job of completely transforming their business around a culture that puts good first. And they're not a huge company. They're only like 300 people, but when we interviewed them, they were cheerleaders for their own company. Right. It wasn't like most companies we interviewed where it's like, well, they're trying, but it still sucks here. Right. Radio Flyer really stood out. A company out of Utah, Bamboo HR, treats their companies incredibly well. And they understand. They went right after the things that cause tension, that cause divisiveness. that cause stress, that cause burnout. For instance, they not only give you a paid vacation, they pay you to take the paid vacation. So they give you a certain amount of money to say, go buy you and your partner a cruise, leave, go away, right? Here's your check, buy what you want, go take a vacation, because you can't come back here, burned out and scared of your job, and we want to treat you well, right? So that's another great example. And there are examples of companies that have really tried to turn things around. I mean, even though they're not getting great press sometimes, a company like Ford Motor Company is making huge strides. Their counterpart, General Motors, with Michael Arena as chief talent officer, is changing the entire way General Motors works. And it's inspiring to see.
Right. Okay. So a lot of companies care a lot about measurements. And I wonder, a company, let's say Ford, they tell their shareholders, oh, we produce, I don't know, 5,000 F-100 this month. So that's a unit of measure that they can express to the shareholders and maybe to the people who see from the outside. But how can they measure kindness and respect and understanding? And how can they communicate that so that other people who could be attracted to this kind, of course the word gets around, but it's just like from word of mouth. It's not like everyone knows that this company is a company that treats their employees with dignity.
So that's the best possible question. And when we first started contemplating the idea of good comes first, we keep in mind, this is built on the consulting that me and Chris Edmonds are already doing. We go into companies and we say, if we treat people with respect, here's how it's going to impact your bottom line. Because we can't talk to a board of directors, we can't talk to shareholders and go, well, we didn't get 5,000 F-150s out this month, but boy, we were really kind, right? That they don't care. Right? They're old white guys who don't care, period. So we can't talk to them like that. We have to say, look, when you start treating people with respect, your engagement numbers are going to go up 30 to 35%, right? Your retention rates, so you don't have to keep spending all that money hiring and HR people and training and onboarding, that goes up 35%. Right? When we fix those two things, engagement and retention, now we have a more satisfied, connected workforce, right? And there's some continuity there. So now our productivity goes up, right? There's a number we can talk to a leader about or a shareholder about, right? And then what happens when productivity goes up? Profits go up, right? So now we are producing 5,000 F-150 trucks, just as we promised. And our engagement is up 30, 35%. Our retention rates are up 30, 35%. Our employees are actually referring their friends and their colleagues to us. Those numbers are up 25, 30%. And our productivity is up 35%. So next month, we're going to build 6,000 F-150s with the same staff, right? That's how we have to talk to those old white guys. That's how we have to talk about this with existing leaders, because they don't care about kindness. They don't care about, those random acts of leadership, like stopping somebody in the hallway and saying, why are you here so late? And how can I help you? They don't care about that stuff. They care about results, because that's how they're measured. Our job is to show them that if they put respect on the same plane as results, that results are better.
Right. Okay. So my last question is, can you specify some respectful behavior? Because I mean, everyone's definition of respect is different. So can you just tell us this is a respectful behavior?
Yes, happy to. So respect is the goal, right? But respect is the big umbrella that covers everything. So let's say that the values that a company defines for themselves, one of them might be integrity. Well, are you treating people with respect if you aren't keeping your promises? No. So respect isn't the problem. Integrity is the problem, right? Truth is the problem. and trust is the problem. So respect is the goal, but underneath respect are values that add up to respect. And it might be integrity. It might be, country first. It might be whatever your values are, right? And then we can ask your peers and the people who work for you, well, how does Mark do when it comes to integrity? Does he do what he says he will do? Does he keep his promises? Right? And a company might have 4 or 5 of those values that all add up to respect. And if you don't do them, if you don't, in this case, do what you say you're going to do, if you don't keep your promises, then you're not treating people with respect.
I thought of a question. I don't know if it's a cruel question to ask, a booby trap, but right now we have vaccine mandates. At least in Canada, we have. So now you may tell someone we need everyone to get a vaccine, and an employee may feel like you are not respecting their freedom or their right of choice. And so now we have different ideology. And the employer may have an ideology, everyone must be vaccinated for the safety of everybody else, and then the other person, the employee, may say, well, my body, my choice, I need to be respected because this is my own personal whatever. I don't know how you will deal with that, but how an employer in general, specifically now that this question is coming up every day, how would an employer deal with this situation?
So here's our reality, and this is why we end the book with the tactical and the practical. Not everybody's going to agree with every decision a leader makes. Even when the leader's trying to absolutely put good first, there's still going to be differences in values. And if your personal values don't line up with the corporate values, then well, attrition's your best friend as a leader. People are gonna, maybe you shouldn't work for a company. If you feel that strongly, maybe you shouldn't work for a company that's mandating vaccines. Maybe you should go somewhere where you're happier and let somebody else take your place that is aligned with those values, that doesn't mind getting the vaccine or is already vaccinated, right? Not everybody, when you change culture, not everybody's going to be aligned.
Right.
And we have to lovingly set people free. We can't force them to align, right? That's no good for anybody. Now the politics continue, and the divisiveness and the temper flares, all that continues. If somebody isn't aligned, or if you're not aligned with your company's values, go work somewhere else, right? Go find a company that respects your view on that issue, but don't fight it where you are, because you become the cancer that eventually needs to be cut out, and nobody wants to be that.
Well, Mark, I think there's a lot of food for thought in your book. I wonder if you could tell us one more time the title of the book, and where can the listeners follow the work that you do? You have many houses. So your favorite house where you like people to follow the things that you are up to?
Well, I'd really appreciate, Chris would too, if people would check out goodcomesfirst.com. We have quite an extensive website that talks about our work and how we hope to help leaders build great cultures. And you can always find me on LinkedIn. Chris and I both still answer our own messages. We don't have an admin that helps. We don't have a filtering process. We handle all of our own social media. So we can easily be found on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, and reach out there.
Okay, all the links will be in the show notes. Mark, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much.